What's going on, YouTube? Culture Dog back here with the penultimate 80s top 10 list video in this series in particular. And it's been a wild ride. I had a lot of great moments and a lot of, stupid moments of why do I have to choose this and make this? And I did a lot of, maneuvering and massaging of these lists to fit in some things I really wanted to fit in there. So I didn't play fair, except I played by my own rules whenever possible, and I mentioned them before, but yeah, we're going for my personal top 10 list, the films that impacted me in the 80s properly first, or then maybe some things I saw later in the 90s, but they were so important or powerful that reached back into the 80s and forced them onto this list. But we're doing science fiction. Right when I started this list, everybody wanted the sci-fi list and the horror list, so I saved them for last because I'm a dick. But we're going to go ahead and do the top 10 sci-fi list. And much like my previous list, there's an Excel spreadsheet with my possible choices, my candidates, and it just keeps going. It's populated all the way down to 1 through 50 probably. So we've got some fodder for future videos. But let's get right into it. Number 10, I saw multiple times in the theaters, though only once in 3D. It's Space Hunter: Adventures in the Forbidden Zone. One of the handful of 3D films in the early 80s, obviously, following in the footsteps of other Star Wars knockoffs, Battle Beyond the Stars, that sort of thing. Low budget science fiction film with a Han Solo-esque character, and Molly Ringwald and Ernie Hudson also showing up in the film, though. And, of course, the great Michael Ironside in the film. Overdog is the really great cinema. But yeah, it's just, a fun Han Solo-esque character getting involved in a bunch of nonsense with some space hotties that are being held hostage. And having to team up with this annoying kid along the way. Yeah, it's fun. It's great. It's got lots of desert scenes and cool vehicles and, B-grade 80s action fun. And yeah, I only saw it once in 3D. I think the other times I saw it were in, like 99-cent theater, second run kind of thing, and they didn't have 3D prints of the film. But yeah, I do remember the 3D being pretty effective at the time, but I was young-ish, 10, 11, something like that. So maybe I didn't even know what was going on. But yeah, there was that period where there was this, and Metal Storm, which I also saw in 3D, and of course all the horror films, Jaws and Friday the 13th. Everybody was going nuts for 3D stuff at the time. And Captain EO at the Epcot Center, saw that as well. But yeah, Space Hunter, I think I saw it 3 times in the theaters. I don't know, me and my dad just loved it. It was cool. Number 9 is, a bit of a mixed bag because it does get kind of slow and it's actually easy to nap out on this film at times. And the special effects bit off a little bit more than they can chew, and a lot of the stuff that's supposed to look, digital is done with practical effects. But yeah, it was just swinging for the fences, and I don't care if it actually, nailed a home run or not. But it's Tron. It was just going for some gusto in the early 80s. And the CG effects, were pretty kick-ass. And I know I was inspired to do, horrible computing at the time. I had one of this, Texas Instruments computer that my dad had. We didn't have any storage for it, so we didn't have a tape drive or anything like that. So everything you coded, you could just run once, and then that was it. It was done. So I remember trying to make this light cycle game on this crappy little Texas Instruments computer. The only game that you could play in it was like a Western shootout, and it took all night to code, and you had to get everything correct to get it to run properly. And I just remember sitting there with this book trying to code this stupid thing, and I was super young. I'm gonna make a light cycle game. I actually did make a little ASCII light cycle, but it didn't really do anything. The good old days. But yeah, Tron, man, it was very influential, and saw it multiple times in the theater. The Wendy Carlo score was great stuff. I still have the story of Tron on vinyl. Technically, I love the sequel even more. Don't tell anybody, but it's got to be number 9 on my list anyway. Science fiction, Tron. Number 8, I've talked about my love for this film in other formats, especially the Laser Discotheque podcast. I remember at the time it being largely written off, and I remember even my dad was like, "Yeah, that movie's okay, but it's not that great," and everybody trashed it for being a High Noon knockoff. Oh, it's just high noon in space. And then, it was only years later, upon reflection, I'm like, why is that a bad thing? It's like, don't eat this pizza. It's cheese and tomato, and it's got bread, and it's freaking awesome tasting. Like, yeah, where's the problem in that, buddy? We're talking Outland. Sean Connery crushing it with his creepy son out in the middle of space on Io, one of Jupiter's moons. It's a mining colony, and it's very alien in terms of the environment. Peter Hyams did a great job in the film, even though he's a very kind of workman-like director that doesn't go for a lot of crazy visual calisthenics. But yeah, it's got a great vibe to it. This kind of submarine almost feel to this mining colony, and yeah, it's just so great seeing Sean Connery going up against everybody when it is absolutely not in his best interests to do so. Francis Sternhagen in there as well, James Sicking, and of course Peter Boyle in there as well. Oh man, really intense. Some of the intense moments of the characters tripping out on drugs, hardcore, was real stunning stuff. And yeah, so bits of over-the-top violence, but a bit of an investigation as well. So it's got a bit of mystery there, and then the killers being sent to take out Sean Connery's character. This sense of impending doom hanging over it. So great. Outland. It's fantastic. And yeah, you can definitely look at it like a part of the Alien universe, like a splinter film on another timeline somewhere. And Wayland Yutani sent some people out to this mining colony to do some work, etc. And yeah, Outland. Love it. Number 7 is really cool Paul Michael Glaser film. I love I was at Harold Faltermeyer did the score, and the score is fantastic as well. I even ripped off that I stole that for a thrash metal song I wrote called An Eye for a What from my old band Near Dark. Maybe I'll put some live footage of that in this video. We'll see. Maybe it'll be at the tail end of this. Anyways, but yeah, I was so inspired by the score for this film that I actually ripped it off. Yeah, Running Man is great. Dystopian science fiction stuff. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I mentioned before. Me and my dad, in the last video, I mentioned we went to go see all of his stuff without question. And putting Schwarzenegger and sci-fi together has always been a fun mix for me. Sometimes with diminishing returns. But yeah, The Running Man, I loved just the whole nonsense with the capitalism of it, the Cadre Cola thing. And Ray Conchita Alonso's great in it. And got some great side characters, Jesse Ventura in there, and Damon. Damon's the coolest. Everybody loves him. I want to buy some Cadre Cola now. Dweezil Zappa also showing up, and Mick Fleetwood. What are they doing in this movie? I don't know, but they're in it, and I love it. It's good stuff. Running Man. Number 6. You knew this had to be on the list. Again, this and Running Man could also be in the action films category, but whatever. They're in science fiction. More dystopian future, because it's the 80s, man. We love our dystopian science fiction. And then it's Robocop, Paul Verhoeven's film, which is, again, ultra violent to the level that, many people weren't comfortable with it, and trimmed it down to appease censors. One of the last gasps of stop motion animation, the Ed 209, was cool stuff, and just Peter Weller kicking ass. But yeah, so dark. And again, the villain, the corporate villains, I love. There's something about the corporate villains of the film, and Miguel Ferrer and Ronnie Cox. And yeah, only in this film is Kurtwood Smith the most terrifying guy. Well, I guess he was pretty terrifying as Red Foreman as well. But Clarence Boddicker is great cinema villain material. But yeah, it was just the typical Verhoeven insanity. Like, there's just this essence of strange behavior and hyper violence, and everything's just a little askew in the film, and that's what I love about it. Robocop is fantastic. Looking forward to the big Arrow video super release that's coming out shortly. Any excuse to watch it is a good excuse. So that's on my list. Number 5, more dystopian science fiction, and one that really helped bring me into the fold of important cinema, even though it's doesn't take itself that seriously, because it's Terry Gilliam helming the film, and of course he's lampooning bureaucracy and a bit of everything in the film. And it is Brazil, very personal, interesting film that I didn't really get what it was before seeing it, and then when I started to kind of figure out what it was all about, it really just captured my attention and my imagination. And it features Jonathan Pryce as a character named Sam, who's a dreamer who's stuck in this soul-crushing world of bureaucracy and failure, and loves old classic Hollywood films and his romantic dreams, and he just doesn't belong and cannot belong in this society. Robert De Niro is fantastic in there as well, and so many great smaller roles. Katherine Hellman and Bob Hoskins, and Michael Palin, Kim Greist, and but yeah, it's so depressing but uplifting at the same time, and the triumph of the will that will get you destroyed in the process. It's humorous, it's grim, but it's got a bitingly sarcastic look at society and government. Brazil, you got to see it. It's fantastic. Number 4, I saw theatrically, and nothing could keep me from it. I was a fan of the book by Frank Herbert, and I was already interested in the work of the director, David Lynch, and needless to say, nothing was stopping me from going to see Dune, a film that introduced me to so much. And at the time, it was regarded as a failure. As years go on, it's seen less and less as a failure. And of course, there's a great film about Jodorowsky's potential version of Dune that would add music by Pink Floyd and Magma, and so much interesting stuff going on in it. And I'd heartily recommend seeing that documentary. And H.R. Giger working on the film, and Salvador Dali working on the film. So that would have been an interesting film, and I'd still love to see an animated version of Jodorowsky's book. He's got a Dune book with everything storyboarded and his vision of the film, and a lot of that's been cherry picked for graphic novels. Mobius was working on it with him, and Ron Cobb was working with him on it. It had like the best of the best going on. So when you have David Lynch's Dune, it felt like this second-rate version on the shelf below, that again, beloved art house director helming it, but it seemed like a little bit of a folly, like he couldn't quite get a grip on it. Some people thought it was over long, but of course there is the famed television cut, which is even longer. It's a huge book, so there's a lot to chew in it. It's visually stunning, weird. Toto and Brian Eno working together on some music. Brian Eno just did the Prophecy theme, but still, like, just the elements of the film just kind of came out of nowhere. Kyle MacLachlan was great as Paul Atreides, and the cast, I won't even begin to get into the cast, but I mean, people that we didn't even know we loved at the time. I didn't know I loved Patrick Stewart when the film came out, but I did years later. Gurney Halleck, he's the man. But in a decade of Star Wars knockoffs, with replicative fade, it was refreshing to see something with a different take on science fiction, and the special effects were weird. The ship designs, the idea of the force field around the fighters and some scenes was just strange and kind of abstract, and everything about it was different, and I appreciate that. And I became obsessed with the film, and I've hunted down numerous copies on home video and Laserdisc and DVD, etc. And I've got far too many copies of Dune in my collection. I am looking forward rather avidly for Denis Villeneuve's take on it as well, because I loved what he did with Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner, I remember that film. Anyways, Dune, it's on the list. Number 3, a film that I was pretty much all in on before it came out, just in terms of the sheer audacious nature of its concept, its coolness factor, and looking back, it's still fantastic, and it's just a super slice of 80s science fiction, and it is W.D. Richter's The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. A film that I now realize that we dragged my mom to against her will. She wasn't really that excited to see this film, but me and my dad were dying to see Buckaroo Banzai fight a bunch of red lectroids and get toe to toe against John Lithgow's character, who is a contemporary of Buckaroo Banzai's father, a scientist who discovered a way of gaining access into an alternate dimension. And there's, creatures and people and planets in these alternate dimensions. And Lord John Worfen, who gets possessed by one of these creatures, spends some time in an insane asylum, while Dr. Banzai's son, Buckaroo, is now, he's a Gary Stu. He's perfect at everything. He's a brain surgeon. He's a rock star. He's a secret agent working for the government. Like, he's perfect at everything he does, even though there's another character named Perfect Tommy. But yeah, I mean, the cast is great. Jeff Goldblum in the film, and Penny Priddy, Ellen Barkin's great. Clancy Brown, and yeah, I mean, just the list goes on, and the quotes are amazing in the film. One of my favorites was when the Black Lectroid is going to visit Buckaroo's compound, and the guy's like, "Hey, what's in the big pink box?" Which got added later, because I've got a bootleg version. Well, yeah, rough cut stuff. There's no finished special effects in a lot of scenes, but that line isn't actually in that scene. So somebody must have dubbed that later and added it in post. But fantastic stuff. Yo-Yo Propulsion. I always wanted to work at their laboratories and become a John Smallberries-esque type guy. The Blue Blaze Irregulars are in there. Everything's just weird about the film. It just kind of keeps heaping on. It's this onion of cool, nerdy quirkiness, and it's fantastic. And so yeah, who cares if he's a Gary Stu? Buckaroo Banzai, man. You love the guy. And you want to see him and his Hong Kong Cavaliers just kick ass and save the day. So I so wish there had been a proper sequel, but there wasn't. And yeah, but get the Shout Factory Select Blu-ray that came out not too long ago and revisit it if you haven't visited it already. Yes, they're going to go to Planet 10. When? Real soon. Number 2, a film I saw theatrically multiple times and on cable countless times. It got so ridiculous that like me and my dad would be in Wendy's, like just reciting lines back and forth, trying to order burgers, and it was like, yeah, I think I've seen that film too many times. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. I saw Star Trek the motion picture theatrically, and of course a lot of it kind of went over my head. I was just a little too young to grok it properly. That said, a lot of the proper audience that it was intended for didn't love it or take it to heart either. Though it's since become a little bit more appreciated over time. But Star Trek II was something that, I don't think anybody anticipated how badass it was going to be. Nicholas Meyer just kicking ass. James Horner really establishing himself as a force to contend with. The horns and everything like that. You definitely paved the way for the Alien score he did a couple of years later. But yeah, just the energy of so many of those scenes. The Kobayashi Maru test, Kirstie Alley as Saavik is great in it, and just the camaraderie between the characters. Some cool CG work in the Genesis demonstration. Oh yeah, so much fun. And just the bit where the shields go down, like there was nothing like it in cinema. You're just like, yes, freaking kick their asses. So yes, I know. Especially us Americans get yelled at by Star Trek fans a lot of times for enjoying this film and some of the other films like 6 that are bloodthirsty action films, and because we're horrible people. But there's no denying Star Trek 2 was fantastic, so it's up there. So yes, it's not as loaded with the spirit of discovery and that sort of stuff. Who cares? It's a great science fiction film. Too bad it's number 2. And in the last video I mentioned Raiders of the Lost Ark should have been number 1. Yeah, sure. Either Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi should be somewhere in this list as well, but they're not, because everybody knows, and of course the impact it just breaks the charts of these anyway, so there's no way to contain or bottle the power of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Just know that, again, they're the patron saints of this list. But number 1 is going to shock a lot of you, because you're going to be expecting me to say Blade Runner, and I'm going to say, yeah, it's Blade Runner. What was I going to say? Blade Runner. Freaking saw it in the theaters, which I thank my lucky stars for being able to do that back in the day. And I remember loving it, because I remember actually hearing the complaints about it. And, nobody wanted to see Han Solo or Indiana Jones get his ass handed to him by a robot. And I wasn't really in love with, I mentioned when I saw Dead Man Don't Wear Plaid, I wasn't, not that I didn't love film noir films, I just hadn't seen them, so I didn't really know much about the kind of noir aesthetic. So yeah, I didn't really know what was going on, but I knew that I really enjoyed this film, and Deckard was a fascinating character, and Roy Batty was a fascinating character, and everybody else in the film. It just keeps getting better and better and better. And when the director's cut dropped in the '90s, it really changed the film for me, and I started to kind of look at it from new, fresh eyes. And it's weird because I see the theatrical cut as an 80s film, and I see the director's cut as either a 90s film or a timeless film, and the final cut as well. It just kind of transcends the period. But for some reason, the theatrical cut with the voiceover and everything, when I watch that, it does feel like the 80s film. Probably because that's the version I saw in theaters, but it seems, of its time. And when I see the other cuts, it just kind of breaks free from that and becomes a timeless film. Of course, the design of Ridleyville, the street cityscapes in the film, the mixture of old and new, it's like a futuristic noir. Of course, future noir being the name of Paul Samon's great book about the film. It's got one hand in this kind of dismal dystopian future, and like one foot in this strange kind of like 1940s design aesthetic in the past, and flying cars and pyramid buildings, and comments on what it means to be a human, and small tiny bits of philosophy like that. Fantastic film, and it's forever going to be my top science fiction, and even all time it's going to best 2001: A Space Odyssey. Sorry Kubrick, I know you're going to be mad at me and all your fans, acolytes, but yeah, Blade Runner, it's number one. Did you have any doubt? All right, we're going to do horror next. Get ready. Hold on to your butts. It's going down. Cheers.